Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Get ready to be inspired, hear success stories, and learn tips and principles for bringing out the best in everyone.
Hello, everyone. This is Debra, and you are watching or listening to Human Potential at Work. As a reminder, I'm the CEO of RU Global, and we are proud to be market influencers and strategists for the community of people with disabilities and the aging market. Today, I have somebody that's become very dear to me, and I was fortunate enough to meet him when I was speaking in Oslo, Norway. His name is Gagan Chhabra, and he is a PhD student, and really he already has his PhD, but he just hasn't done the picked it up, I guess. And so we're really excited to have you on the program, Gagan. So let's start by talking a little bit about who you are and then move into your work.
First things first, Debra, I'm so happy that you invited me to this podcast, and really fortunate that you are here with me and this sharing this moment. So talking about myself, like I was born and brought up in India. I moved to Norway almost 6 years ago in 2012, and I started working on this theme of disability and employment 3 years ago approximately. And I was extremely fortunate that I was born in a city called as Ahmedabad on the west coast of India, the same province from where Mahatma Gandhi comes from. It's called as Gujarat, and was fortunate that my family was very progressive. They kind of made sure that I end up getting the best education possible in India. Did my management from one of the best business schools in India and perhaps in the world, the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. Serendipitously ended up landing in Norway 6 years ago. I did a pivot towards disability policies and social research in general. And here I am in Berkeley doing my stint as a visiting researcher and talking to you at this very moment.
Yes, and we're excited to have you here in the United States. So Gagan, tell the audience, why do you care about the disability community?
Yeah, so I have a vision impairment. I was born and brought up in India, as I mentioned, and at the age of 10, I was diagnosed with a problem called as retinitis pigmentosa. And back in the day in India, when it comes to disability, person is pigeonholed into a box or a category that here is a person called as Debra. She has this problem, or Gagan, he has this problem, and that's it. And then people stop thinking about the potentiality of the individual, the resources, the capabilities which the individual has, and that is a major problem. And I realized it very early. When people started questioning me at the age of 11, that should you be sending Gagan to St. Xavier's School? Should you be sending him to become this management consultant, which he wants to become? Should he have some other dreams? Should he take up auditing, advanced accountancy, and statistics as courses? All of those questions about expectations from society that what I can do or cannot do started coming to me. So it was always in the back of the mind that I have to do something related to this. But again, like as I mentioned, I was the career was heading towards the management consultation, towards business development, and I just did not think that I would be able to do something on the disability front. But then serendipitously, I got a chance, went to a workshop, conference, whatever you want to call it, in India back in 2011. It was about poverty and disability and its connection to shame. And I spoke there, and it was just a beautiful experience. I realized I was 24 years back then, and I realized that it is so important that I cannot just pass as a person who can manage without talking about disability, without exploring it further, and without advocating for it for the rest of the other people around. So that's when I pivoted towards disability research, disability policies, came to Norway, took a master's in international social welfare, and subsequently a master's in special needs education. And now I'm finishing off the PhD in social research and social policy. So yeah, it was kind of emerging out of my personal experience of living with a visual impairment, with a disability in a society which is the point of departure they have is disability is highly stigmatized.
Right.
There are a lot of societal expectations, and then fighting it off. Of course, as I mentioned, without the support of my family, who were really kind, progressive, thoughtful, enlightened, I would not have made it. And since now, when I'm sitting here talking to you, sitting in Berkeley, I feel that Voltaire once said, and Spider-Man popularized this, that with great power comes great responsibility. I feel that I have the privilege to do something fantastic and to start a global North-South dialogue
Right.
on themes of disability. Yeah.
And I think the global North and South conversation, it is critical. And it feels, especially with some political people these days saying, that, let's just take care of our own countries. Everybody take care of your own countries. I think, the work that you're doing to make sure that, we're one world and that we're all included. And some of the data that you've found from your research, and we're going to put out some research that just got published today in Norway, and we have an English version of it as well. And I'll put it not only in the Facebook link, but we'll also put it with the show and everything else. So we make sure that people find it. But I thought it was very interesting, the work that you had done when you were comparing youth with disabilities in India versus youth with disabilities in Norway, which it's those two countries are so different. And now you're actually, you've been invited by Berkeley. They want to understand your work and explore your work. And so now you're looking at also youth with disabilities here in the United States, which I think is fascinating. So tell us more about your work.
Yeah, like you hit the nail on its head. Like often people just think in a very parochial, provincial, and tribal senses right now at this very moment, because there is this rhetoric at the political level about America first and Brexit, and about this whole movement towards let us take care of our people first, or us versus them. And what I'm actually trying to do is I'm trying to trace convergences or overlaps when it comes to the disability policies and the employment experiences of disabled youth in Norway and India. And you were right when you pointed out that both the countries are so different. They are two worlds apart. When you pick up any macro level factor, Debra, if it's economic factor, social, political, cultural, legal, demographic, pick up any factor, and you will find Norway and India are standing on two different sides of the poles. But when it comes to disability policy, what I was curious is that since Americans with Disability Act was introduced in 1990, has the disability policy landscape changed in these two countries? And if it has changed, how does it look like? And what are the factors if it's becoming a bit more similar? So I started taking a bird's eye view about the disability policy landscape in these countries. And what I found was something which was very interesting, that policies such as social regulations, which are anti-discrimination legislation, universal design norms, accessibility principles, all these are kind of becoming a global norm, whether we like it or not. People across the world are talking about these policies. People across the world are making an effort to implement these policies. And it's not just only in the rich, developed global North countries that anti-discrimination is an in thing, if I may say so. So that's where, for instance, like my research kind of fits in, and it states that, okay, when it comes to these kind of policies, they are becoming similar in these two very different countries like Norway and India. So we are kind of looking at similar problems, and policymakers are sitting together around the table and saying, we have to find out common solution to the similar problems, which are contextual, but at the same time, the problems are much more global, universal. Say, for instance, when I interviewed policy experts and youth with visual disabilities in Oslo and New Delhi, what I found out, which was very interesting, is that a youth in Oslo is saying to me that when I go for an interview and I say that I'm not visually impaired on my resume, I get called for the interview. But when I reach there with my white cane, the interviewer just says to me, "Oh, gee, you have a disability. We did not know that you have a disability. We just found someone else." So this is happening in Oslo. It's not. This kind of experience is not restricted to the developing world, the world which is global south. That's what we call them, right? So the point of departure was initially the idea that Norway has this open, inclusive, accessible, and enlightened welfare state, and a labor market which is very inclusive. But perhaps there's more than what meets the eye, and one has to be a bit more honest about having this conversation, not just in the Norwegian context. I was in the Lighthouse for Blind and Visually Impaired in San Francisco just 2 weeks ago, and I went to a youth employment series program. And here I was talking to youth who were like in the age group of 14 to 24 years old. And when I asked them what kind of challenges they have faced, and they come up with similar stories, Debra, you'd be shocked, appalled to listen to their stories about being bullied at school, the society having low expectations from them, people asking them, why do you want to work? How would you be able to work? Do you know how to use computers? Do you know how to send emails? All these things. And people kind of enforcing their will, their priorities on these people who are from San Francisco, which was the birthplace of, or Berkeley, which was the birthplace of disability rights movement in the United States and champion in the world. So that's where, for instance, my research kind of brings us to the common table and says to all the stakeholders involved that perhaps the employment barriers which youth or people with disabilities face are much more ubiquitous than what we want to accept. Perhaps the strategies which policymakers are coming up is a lot more similar in its intent than what we want to accept. And now what the important thing is, that's where the proof of the pudding is going to be, that can we come up with a consensus to move along and implement these policies and kind of create an ecosystem wherein people with disabilities in general and youth, because youth with disabilities is a very marginalized group. Because if you think about this, Debra, that when people talk about young people, they talk about creative people, energetic people, the change agents of tomorrow. But when the moment you talk about youth with disabilities, they're like, oh, they have a disability. And the idea is that disability is disempowering. People are just purely hapless, helpless victims. People are very are not able to take care of themselves. They are more dependent. They are care receivers. All these narratives start to kick in, and then it kind of problematizes the whole youth narrative. And what I want to say is one has to have an honest dialogue about these things in a global north rich developed country and a global south developing country context, and say that youth with disabilities could be agents of change just as the way ordinary youth are.
Yeah, and I know some of these things are happening. I told this story before, but there was a very talented woman with a visible disability, and she had all the educational degrees. She had a wonderful background. She was looking for a position, and she was brought from the East Coast of the United States to the West Coast for a job interview. And when she came in for the interview in her scooter, the recruiter looked at her and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, the job has been filled." Yeah. Now, we all know what that means. We're not going to hire you because you have a disability. And this was for a senior position. So she didn't take the position. Well, she didn't get that position, but another more enlightened corporation got that position. And there's so many examples. And I find that even with my daughter with disabilities, we were always, the bar was set so low for her. And sure. So if we're creating all this wonderful legislation, we have the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We're in the United States, we're suing, organizations, corporations that don't include us. We're suing you if your websites aren't accessible. But if all of the stuff that we're doing is not changing things for people with disabilities, what should we be doing? And I know this is what your research is exploring, but I believe we need all these things in place. We need legislation. We need all the stuff that's being done. But the reality is we're still looking at people with disabilities as if they are not valuable to society. And I know you and I have had so many discussions about this, including, You know, it came out in the Scandinavian countries that they had successfully wiped out Down syndrome. And many know my daughter has Down syndrome. And I thought, okay, what? And so I went and I researched it, and of course realized that, through technology, we know that within 2 weeks you can find out if the fetus that you're carrying has Down syndrome, and if they do, you just take care of the problem and try again, as Richard Dawson so famously and inappropriately said. But the thing, and I know you and I've had this conversation, I do not think that we are evolved enough as human beings to decide that certain segments of our society, like people with Down syndrome, they don't even deserve to be born. Right. And what could go wrong with that? And by the way, not everybody's going to get that test within 2 weeks. And so I love the Scandinavian countries, and they're considered the most enlightened in the world. But if we're having newspaper articles come out that we're so proud of doing this, it just makes me wonder. And as you said, so who else doesn't belong? So, okay, we're going to get rid of all the people with Down syndrome. And of course, this will remind us of other times in history where we decided people didn't deserve to be alive. Yes. I think it's a real slippery slope. And so I want you to comment on that, but I also want you to talk about, so what do we do? Because what I find is most of the people, not every single person with a disability I've met, but most of the people that I meet with disabilities, I find that they're innovators, they're problem solvers, they're very tenacious. They want to make a difference. They don't want anybody in their way. When I met you, I was so impressed with your wisdom, your education, what you had to say, your desire to really make a difference in the world. I consider you youth. You're 32 years old. I'm much older than that. But how do we change things, and so that we stop feeling sorry for people with disabilities and understand they have all the same, abilities that everybody else does? Yes, maybe you use a screen reader. And maybe you travel with, a sighted guide because that makes sense. But to decide that you don't add value, Gagan, because, you're blind or vision impaired, I think is a loss. I know for sure is a loss to the world. So how do we start changing the conversation and make sure that the younger people, as well as others, are really able to find their voice and show the world what they're capable of doing?
Like it's such an important question, Debra, the one which you're asking right now, that how do we change the situation? Because think of this, that when I came to United States and when I started digging into the data in the United States, often they talk about this 30% number, like that people with disabilities, approximately 30% of them are employed in United States. If I take it back 2 steps back and go to Norway and I check the numbers there, they say 43% of people with disabilities are employed as compared to 75-80% of people with people without disabilities. And the same is the case in India. Like the statistics paint the same grim picture. Doesn't matter which country you pick up. So, and you gave this example that how corporations are being sued in the United States. I had the great fortune to meet Lenny Fengol, our common friend, and we talked about structured negotiation and her beautiful work, that of getting people on the table and not just suing the corporations and scaring them that if you don't do this, we're going to sue you and you have to pay this money. So moving beyond fear is the key. So, for instance, let me take 2 steps back and explain this. In my understanding, it's not just about the stakes which you use as government or as civil society or as members of enlightened community, disabled community, to force somebody to give in and to say, yes, you have to solve this problem because it is there in the law, and if you don't do it, then we will come after you. That's not the only way of doing it. It's very important to be much more collaborative, much more cooperative, kind of use sermons, if I may say so, kind of come up with a mechanism that people can talk about sharing of best practices. People can talk about transferring information from different or not do knowledge transfer. Come up with a mechanism that everybody can be on the same page about disability. And as you said, we have to change the conversation that now we are living in 21st century in the age of artificial intelligence, very good screen reader capacity, like excellent support systems. So the important thing is this, that how do we leverage this to make sure that people with disabilities can have voice, can come up and say that, listen, I am functioning, I am capable, I am willing and able to work. You just have to give me an opportunity. And the important thing is this, that you must be aware of the statistic from CDC. 25% of people with disabilities are there in the general population in the United States, which is approximately 75 million people.
Right.
Think of this, it's a huge chunk of population. It's not like a small fringe margin sitting in the edge of the society or in the bottom rung of the society. It's a huge chunk of population. So we cannot just turn a blind eye or just say, yeah, these people exist, and so be it. We can exclude them from education system. We can exclude them from labor markets. We can marginalize them and push them out from the societal sphere or community participation. We have to somehow come up with a mechanism that we start an honest, open dialogue. We put disability on the agenda of policymakers, of civil society people, of business corporate leaders, and say that, listen, disability, let us, before you talk about disability and impairment, we first are humans. And like any other humans, we have fears, aspirations, expectations. We want to excel in whatever we can do best. And we want to contribute. We want to have a meaningful life. And if we start humanizing disability, if we start explicating to people or through by leading by example and also giving people a chance and voice, that listen, disability is like any other immutable characteristic. Debra, I was not born with blonde hair and blue eyes, unfortunately or fortunately. So I did not choose that, right? The color of my skin is not chosen by me. My visual impairment was never chosen by me. It's kind of this quintessential universalist immutable characteristic, which we are dealing with, disability or impairment. Some people end up being 6 feet tall, others are 5 feet 4 inch tall. Some people end up having weaker eyes, visual impairment. Others have sharper eyes, no visual impairment. Some people are like Usain Bolt, who can run really fast. Others use a wheelchair to move around, to walk around on wheelchair, if I may use that phrase. So we have to have this honest conversation about the fact that here we are in a society wherein in the past disability was this medicalized category, and then the disability activists came up and said, no, disability is not a medicalized category. It's the society which oppresses disabled people, and the social model of disability took over. And now we are in the phase wherein we have to talk about the universality of disability, the ubiquity of suffering, and say that this is just quintessential element of human existence. Just a quick sidetrack, if I may add this. Like when Buddha, when Buddha was never a Buddha by default. He was not born Buddha. He became Buddha, and he was Siddhartha, King Siddhartha or Prince Siddhartha. So there's this fantastic story which is told about him. So how he transitioned from becoming this regular run-of-the-mill prince to Buddha, the enlightened one. He was in his palace. He ended up seeing when sick person, disabled person, a person with who was old, who was dying. And when he started contemplating about these three things, the sickness, disability aspect of life, the old age aspect of life, and the fact that every one of us, we are going to die, this aspect of life, he said, doesn't matter if I'm a prince or if I'm pauper, I have a common fate. And the moment he started contemplating about that, he said, no, this is universal. And one has to kind of come up with a way of having, maximizing well-being. And that's where, he became enlightened. So again, the point is this, that we have to have this kind of a dialogue wherein, we tell the corporate world not to be afraid of disability, just as the way 40, 50 years ago, they were afraid of hiring people from different races or people, women were not part of the labor market, for instance. But the needle has shifted. 8 years ago, we had Barack Obama as the president of the most powerful man in the world. And that happened because of the fact that we have evolved this on the same way, in the similar fashion. We have to kind of evolve as society, kind of come up with a mechanism that, we don't pigeonhole people. We are not categories. We are humans. So in a nutshell, let us humanize disability. Let us make it a human trait and a ubiquitous condition.
I agree. And that's one reason why I started Human Potential at Work, with a play on words, because,
Yeah.
when I was telling Doug Forrester, our producer, about you,
Mhm.
I was telling him he's from India, he's worked in Norway, he's got multiple master's degrees, he's got his PhD. And I explained characteristics of you and things your achievements. And then I said, oh yeah, and also he's, blind or vision impaired. Only I did it deliberately like that because often that's the first thing we start with. Let me tell you who Gagan is. Well, Gagan's, blind. Just use that. That totally misses the point of who you are. And
Mm.
and also, as a reminder to the audience, 80% of people with disabilities were not born with them. I mean, when Sarah was born, Sarah had an extra chromosome, so, I think that's really cool. She has an extra chromosome, but it's who she is at every aspect. That's just who she is. And she has added a lot of value to the world. And
Mm.
I think if we start breaking down what it means to be a human being, and also,
Yeah.
Gagan, as we age, we acquire disabilities, and
Yeah.
there's 72 million Americans that are now 54 years or older, and that's just from a U.S. lens. There are baby boomers all over the world, and we're acquiring disabilities for the first time in our lives.
Yes.
So I'm just curious, and I am being very sarcastic here, but
Yeah.
if we decide that people aren't valuable,
Uh-huh.
and let's say it's a vision loss. Am
Yeah.
I valuable at 2020? Yes. Okay. You're valuable. You're valuable at 2020. Am I
Mm.
valuable at 2040 eyesight? 2080? Where's that line where all of a sudden I can add no value to the world? I think if you start breaking it down, and we're actually going to write a book about this, aren't we, Gagan? So,
We
but
should name that, Debra. That book, like about talking about this quintessential element of human existence, disability.
right.
Sure.
What makes us human, and how dare any of us decide that another person is not human enough?
Yes.
What in the world is that even about? And then I have spent so much of my career. I recently wrote the book Inclusion Branding, and
Yeah.
I've gotten great reviews, but it's hard sometimes. I get very discouraged because in the United States, a lot of the corporations I'm dealing with, they're terrified of this community. They are afraid that we keep suing them, which we are going to keep suing you. If you do not include us, we're going to keep suing you. And I'm very pro corporations, but I am getting a little aggravated with the lack of progress, and I
Yes.
will get a hold of my attitude and I'll be good, but this is ridiculous. We know that including people with disabilities in your workforce is good for business. This is
Yes.
not just about you being sued or not sued. It is good for
Right.
business. And we see stories. I had Cisco on, Patrick Romzik, who was formerly with Cisco, and he talked about they hired a group of people that were blind and vision impaired in
Mhm.
Bangalore, and they were so impressed because what they found was not
Mhm.
only were these great employees, okay,
Yeah.
but they were twice as more. They were two times as productive as their
Yes.
counterparts that weren't
Sure.
blind,
Sure.
and they were more empathetic with the customers. They got better reviews from the customers because the customers don't know. I'm talking to you on the phone. They don't know that you're blind or vision impaired, but
Mhm.
they just know you're empathetic about their
Mhm.
problem. And they found that these employees were amazing. And, you know, we have study after study after study and research and data that proves that people with disabilities add great value to the workforce. But
Okay.
you talked about this earlier. It's about fear. It's the fear of the unknown. And also, I want to make one more rant and then I'm going to stop. But even the people with disabilities that are employed are
Yeah.
grossly underemployed. If you're a person with autism or you're a person with Down syndrome, go bag groceries or work in the mailroom. What?
Yes.
Well, wait a minute. What if I am a very talented, programmer, or I'm a very talented musician, or I'm talented at a billion things, because we're talking about billions of human beings.
Yes.
I just think it is really time to humanize this conversation. So let me give you a moment to talk. I threw a lot at you.
Yeah, no, no, you're spot on. And I think that we have to have this conversation about humanizing disability at this very moment in human history, because listen, Debra, I have done this thought experiment in my head many a times. We are at the time, or we are at the cusp of technology, disruptive technology change, wherein 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, we are talking about a cyborg future. We're talking about, augmented reality. We're talking about, think of the time, for instance, 10, 20 years down the line, they come up with a chip wherein I could put into my eye, and I cannot just see you and your face and everything and all the beautiful features, but I could see way beyond. I could see the things which like right to the minuscule details, the pixels and so on, and then perhaps, and you don't have that capacity to see those pixels
Right.
and to augment your reality. And here, if I have that power, are you disabled for me? Do I become a superhuman?
Right.
If I have that chip in my eye, for instance, or for instance, if I have a chip in the ear, and if I was hard of hearing, and now I'm able to hear ultrasound, these sounds which are only heard by bats and dogs. I'm forgetting its name. Ultrasonic sounds. Yeah.
Right.
So if I'm able to hear that and you're not able to hear it, are you disabled? Do you understand?
I do understand.
Or
are you more human? Are you more human now than I am?
Exactly.
Are you a better human than I am? Are you a superhuman?
Exactly. So that is where, for instance, we are as a trajectory of future which we are staring at, whether we like it or not. Some might debate, argue, discuss that, oh, it's very far off. It'll happen in 30, 40, 50 years. I can grant them that. Okay, perhaps it happens in 70 years. But then does that mean that the people who will end up having these augmented chips, these incredible technology, wearing it or implanting it in their bodies, will they start becoming superhumans, and the ones who are so-called quote unquote normal people of today will become disabled in front of them? So one has to have a very nuanced discussion about these topics right now, at this very moment in our history, because we're heading towards that very exciting, but at the same time a bit scary future. As you mentioned about a couple of things with Sarah and Down syndrome, it actually breaks my heart that when people say that they can that one life is worth more in value as compared to the other life, for instance, because we have already in the 20th century gone through that path, and we know that that's a horrifying, terrifying path, and 70,000 people with disabled people were killed under the Nazi regime in before 1945, and we don't want to go there. We think that humanity is capable of far better compassion, empathy, and than that phase. That was like a dark side of humanity. We want to rise far above that. We want to create as much of a level playing field as we can. We want to kind of make the society as inclusive and as just as we can, not just for the rich world, but in the poorer parts of the world, because often these kind of conversations are hijacked, and people just talk about, for instance, the OECD countries, the global north settings. But we have to kind of say that yes, we should start the conversation from here, but we should take it to the four corners of the earth. We should go to Mozambique, to South Africa, to to Burkina Faso, from there to India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, parts of Latin America, Bolivia, Paraguay, Uruguay, and make a case that people with disabilities are people first. Let us start drilling that idea into people's head. And it's hard, for people to appreciate that right now, just as the way it was hard back in the time for people to appreciate that women can work, women could get education, women can be successful lawyers and can run for becoming a president of the United States. It was just a pipe dream back in the day, but now it has become a reality, and we have to kind of change the conversation, change the tone, make corporates understand that no longer can they just sit on the fences and say, yeah, we are doing our level best, we have a diversity policy, we have an inclusion policy.
Right.
We have to kind of say to them that what actually are you doing when it comes to involving people with disabilities into mainstream employment? What actually are schools doing to make sure that people with disabilities or students with disabilities get a fair shot at getting the best education they can have? You know, for instance, I heard these stories from India, wherein people, some exceptionally talented youth with visual disabilities told me that when they were growing up, they were said, oh, you don't have to take mathematics, you can take music. Oh, it's all right. Or for instance, youth in Oslo, when they were going to the mathematics class, some of the teachers ended up saying to them, you don't have to be in this class, you can just go out and play.
Right.
The moment a teacher ends up saying that to a student with disability or child with disability, what they are saying is that there are two different expectations.
Mm-hmm.
There are two different bars, and we are setting the bar so low for you, and perhaps the children or the student might just take the lower bar, not knowing the consequences of that, not knowing that they're going to internalize this low social expectations, not knowing that this low social expectation or this low expectation from a teacher is going to come back at them and say, oh, perhaps the employers think of me like this, and I have to just follow it follow that cue. Perhaps the welfare state bureaucracy thinks like this for me, and I have to just follow the suit. Perhaps my colleagues say to me, or my family members say to me, gee, you cannot have a family. It'll be very difficult for you to have a family. Oh, perhaps it'll be difficult for you to raise kids. Perhaps it'll be very difficult for you to go out and participate in the community. And what you end up doing is you end up pushing people who are already marginalized, who are already come up with a very, who don't have the head start, so-called, in life, further away to the margins. And that has to change. You know, you have to make the margin the new center, if I may say so.
No, I agree. And I think that you wind up really discouraging these young people and even older people. I mean, it's really, age is not part of it, but you wind up discouraging them so much that they don't even, they don't even know how to tell you that they want to make a difference. And so and I know, I will say to the audience, I'm definitely going to have Gagan back on. He's going to come back on as a regular guest. He's brilliant. You see how brilliant he is. We want to do some more social experiences in India and Norway and the United States. But Gagan, I know we don't have a lot of time left on the show today, but what would you recommend to parents and young people with disabilities to because all kind of barriers are put in their way? What is some advice that you have to them to find out who they really are? Because you're 32 years old now, and you had amazing parents, and I know you lost your mom at a very early age at 21. And what would you recommend for them to do?
Yeah, as I said, that I was really fortunate, Debra, and I consider myself as a child of serendipity and good fortune. That I had such incredible parents. When I was 10, my parents had a choice to take me to a special needs education school, or to stick with my regular school. And my mother was a force of nature. And she said, no, he's going to study in the regular school, and he's not just going to study in the regular school. I will work with him. I'll read out stuff for him. I will organize all the volunteers which he might need. And I'll make sure that he ends up getting very good grades. And she never said that you cannot become a management consultant. She never said to me that you cannot do this. So often what I have understood from the youth stories from Oslo and New Delhi is that parents have very, very good intentions. They want to protect their children from harm, from danger, from pain, from unnecessary suffering. And these are all noble desires, and these can manifest in different forms. And what ends up often happening is that sometimes, youth or young children or young adults are too much protected by the parents, by their parents. And then what happens is that these young children, when they end up becoming these adolescent and then youth, they kind of see the world through a overprotected lens.
Right.
So one common theme which came across when I talked to the youth in Oslo and New Delhi and even in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago, was when youth said to me that when parents gave them the leeway, told them that, you are like a quote unquote, I hate using this word, but normal kid. You can do whatever you want to do. Oh, you want to go to school by yourself? Here is a way. I'll walk with you for the first 3, 4, 5 times, and then if you want to go by yourself, try, go for it. And if you get lost, ask people around. If you get if you find it difficult, if you fall down, then get up. For instance, I don't want to trivialize this, and I don't want to say it by any stretch of imagination that all parents should do that, because I am not a parent. And my case, and the case which I'm representing right now for the youth with visual disabilities in Oslo and New Delhi, perhaps might not be generalizable to all the parents and to all the young adults with disabilities. But there is a ring of truth in this thing, that one has to kind of let these children, let these young adults be themselves, manifest their potentiality, their aspirations, their freedom, their capacities. Because if you overprotect them, if parents, teachers, welfare state bureaucrats end up saying to these kids and young adults that life is going to be tough, you have it's tough for sighted people, it's tough for people who do not have disability, and for you in particular, since you have a disability, it's going to be even more tough. Then what you end up doing is that you end up creating this sense of fear, this sense of inferiority, if I may say so. Young adults end up internalizing this fear, and then eventually they will end up just expecting low from themselves. And nothing can harm you more than having low self-esteem, low expectation from yourself. Because the moment that gets internalized into you, doesn't matter which policy, which law, what kind of support systems a country can bring in. For instance, I must say this, that Norway has one of the best welfare states in the world, the best social benefit system, the best social services system. Because, and I'm saying it when I'm comparing this to United States. Yeah. I know how the SSI system is working. I know how stigmatizing it could be. I know the disability benefit system could kind of create disincentives for people to get back into the labor market or to get education in the United States. In Norway, it's very, very enlightened. They are doing their level best to create a just and a fair and an inclusive society. But at the same time, if you become too overprotective, if you start questioning the intrinsic worth, value of a child or student or adult with a disability, then you start pushing them to the fringes. You start making them doubt their capabilities, and that's not a good thing. That we have to transcend that as a community.
I agree. I know that we're out of time, and we definitely are going to have Gagan to come back. He's going to come back on the show, and we're going to share some of his research with you as well. But Gagan, tell the viewers how they can contact you. I know you're on Facebook, and I believe you're on LinkedIn.
Yes. Yeah, I think the best way to contact me is through my email address. That's my first name, Gagan .Chhabra at oslomed.no. I can put that in the comment field for anybody who wants to contact me. I'll be based in Berkeley, United States, for the next 6 months until the end of February. I'll post my US phone number there. If people want to have a coffee with me, have a lunch with me, I'll be extremely delighted. I'll be traveling to the East Coast. Professor Peter Blank has been very kind from Syracuse University. He's invited me to present my work there. Professor Derek Coburn from the Institute on Disability and Public Policy would be there in Washington, D.C. That's where I'll be presenting my work in the early part of November. And I'll be heading to Harvard University as well for a brief research visit, perhaps otherwise to attend some conferences. So I'll be on the East Coast around the first week of November. If you happen to be around in that space, I would love to meet people, expand my horizon. I'm here to learn from experiences of people with disabilities and corporate leaders, market influencers like you, Debra, because I think it has to be a multi-pronged approach. We cannot just focus only on people with disabilities to advocate for their rights. We have to focus on people like you who are kind of this bridge between the disabled community as well as the corporate America or the corporate world, if I may say so. So let us have an open dialogue. Let us sit together, grab a coffee, lunch, and talk about these issues. And I want to learn more and expand my horizon.
I agree. This is why I had him on, guys. So thank you, Gagan. I want to do a shout out for my producer, Doug Foresta, for Jeanette, who's doing a wonderful job today with closed captioning, and Jeanette's with archive captioning so that we can make sure the show is fully accessible. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you, Gagan.
Thank you, Debra. Thank you, Doug. And thank you, Jeanette.